It's Mr. Walker, and this week is a review of period 2, so 1648 to 1815. And today I'm going to do just an overview video on that era, and then the next few days I'll do a more specific overviews on different chapters from that era. Here I'm going to take some notes and take some along with me if you like. So I've got my McKay book open to chapter 15, and basically it goes from chapter 15 to chapter 20 in McKay. And then in the Crash Course book, it starts right here, I guess, period 2, chapters 9 through 15. Okay? And so some ways that I think about it, I'm just going to write on this one side of the page, 1648. And on the other side of the page, I'm going to write 1815. Okay. Right. So 1648 is the actual date, the significance of this date and of this date. They're significant for the ending of two major conflicts. And one, this is the end of the 30 Years' War, the Peace of Westphalia. And that's end of 30 Years' War. That happens then. And remember, that's in the Holy Roman Empire, HRE, which is starting to be dominated by two major countries, Prussia and Austria. But they are absolutely decimated, and we'll get into that later, right? A third of the population dies in the Holy Roman Empire during the 30 Years' War. And then 1815, this is the Congress of Vienna, and that's the defeat of Napoleon. And if you remember the Quadruple Alliance, that defeats him in 1815. And the goals of Metternich, that's all. We're going to start the next unit about the goals of Metternich and all of that. But that's the defeat of Napoleon. The major chapters for this time are, one is Absolutism, and constitutionalism. The other one is, and I'll give you a few notes on these two, on those chapters, how to think about it. The next one is Scientific Revolution, and the Enlightenment. This is a revolution of ideas. Scientific Rev and Enlightenment is that other one. And then you've got the French Revolution and Napoleon. Another way to think of this, so this is political revolutions, and I'll keep going. At the very end of this, in England at least, and in the Netherlands, you've got the agricultural revolution and the early industrial revolution. So you have ag, rev, and indust, rev. And of course, that's limited to England by the later part of this time period. And then the other thing you have is I guess I'll say global commerce. Remember, last one was global exploration. Well, now commerce or business is what's going on. They've established themselves, and this is when you see what we've talked about in the last unit about the triangle trade. Triangle trade. And of course, that involves a massive amount of slavery and plantations and colonies, and all that comes with it, including the wealth of Europe and the subjugation of people in other parts of the globe, especially in the New World. Absolutism and constitutionalism. Where is this happening mostly? Well, there's absolutism, especially during this time in France until the French Revolution. And with Louis XIV is the main example of that. But you've also have the rise of Russia with Peter the Great. Peter the Great. Those are the two ones that we really talked about a lot. In 1648, you don't see very much from Spain anymore. The major players in the world are going to be Britain and France, and then Russia's going to start rising up a little bit, as well as Prussia is going to start rising up. And again, you still have the Ottoman Empire, which is on a sort of a slow decline over this time period. Constitutionalism, this is where you have places where there aren't absolutist monarchs, where there have been challenges to that, and you'll find that in England and in the Netherlands or the Dutch. And the big dates that have to do with absolutism and constitutionalism, I think of, remember, there's little boy Louis XIV at the end during the 30 Years War, and so he's around all the way into the early 1700s here. And so in France, you just have to know the Louis the 14th, 15th, and 16th. And so that's in France. And Peter the Great is also in that zone of mid 1700s, early 1700s. And so you have the English Revolution, and we'll do another one on that here too. In 1649, that's Charles I. Head falls off. And then you have Cromwell. And I'll have another video about that until you get to 1688, which is the Glorious Revolution, where the monarch agrees that Parliament is going to share power. And so that's an example of constitutionalism in England by 1688. Whereas at the same time, you have an extremely strong monarch in France and in Russia. However, in England, you have the rise of the nobles and the bourgeois who are taking power from the king. And then when's the French Revolution? That's 1789. And that's when another king's head comes off. That's Louis XVI. That's Louis XVI. This is not when his head comes off. That comes off in 1793, I believe. But 1789 is the start of the French Revolution. That's the tennis court oath and the Declaration of the Rights of Man. It happens in 1789, and we're going to do specific things about that. But these are sort of big dates to know. 1789, French Revolution. 1649 and 1688, Glorious Revolution. 1648, Peace of Westphalia. 1815, Congress of Vienna. And then you can sort of put things in between there. Let's see, Scientific Revolution and Enlightenment. This is a challenge of the general way of thinking, and it's the idea of using observation and reason and math in order to challenge traditional ways of thinking, such as challenge traditions of the church and of the Greeks and the Romans. And we saw this especially with the challenging of a geocentric universe and the promotion of a heliocentric universe, and then of anatomy and of challenging the other ideas of dissection of Vesalius and challenging the horoscope. And so that's the scientific revolution is happening during this time. Again, similar to humanism and the Renaissance, it's only it's a small amount of society. So while you have these changes using observation and reason and math to challenge the church and to challenge Greek and Roman thought, and also, to challenge superstition and folk beliefs, you also have a continuation of all of these superstitions and the church and folk beliefs while this is going on too. And then the Enlightenment, instead of looking at nature using observation and reason to challenge nature, they're challenging human society. And so first it starts with the scientific revolution, and then it comes with the ideas of the Enlightenment, ideas that challenge similarly church and politics. And we'll get into that when we talk about that, that use logic and reason. And we think of Montesquieu and John Locke and Beccaria and Adam Smith and all of those folks. And then you've got the French Revolution and Napoleon, 1789 through 1815. And we'll do a video, going over remembering the different phases of that revolution and the causes and the effects. And then the Agricultural Revolution and Industrial Revolution. We'll go over that, and we'll talk about what were traditional ways of farming and think about gender roles. And so this is going to have to do with, and you wrote about this, and also the textile industry changing, how it challenged traditional ways and the new types of economics that came out of changing agriculture and new inventions within the Industrial Revolution. And so that's pretty much the overview of this time period. In this book, think about different models of political sovereignty affected the relationship among states and between states and individuals. This, of course, has to do with absolutism or constitutionalism, the way the relationship between the person and the state, between citizens and the state. The expansion of European commerce accelerated the growth of a worldwide economic network. Think of, there's global commerce, triangle trade, slavery, plantations. There's one of the wars that's fought during this time is fought between European powers, but completely overseas. That's the 7 Years' War that ends in 1763. Also with these colonies, you have revolts. This is 1776. That's another important date. That's the American Revolution. And so that's the Americans successfully American Rev, able to successfully break away from British control. The popularization and dissemination, so the people's awareness and the spread of the scientific revolution and the application of its methods to political, social, and ethical issues. So the scientific revolution of science, and then when you apply science to politics or social or ethical issues, that's what's known as the Enlightenment. This leads to increased, although not unchallenged, emphasis on reason in European culture. And then finally, the experiences of everyday life were shaped by demographic, that means population, environmental, medical, and technological changes. And one of the things, of course, that's important today, the vaccine and Edward Jenner, that discovery happens in the late 1700s in England. And the technological changes, of course, with the agricultural revolution, that we'll see that massively changed the way that people work and live. And so that's 1648 to 1815, an overview. Okay, thank you.